3. Let me tell you, we've had 2 brilliant podcasts here that you'll never see. Just joking. It's welcome to the ICBA Cast live on Facebook, hopefully live on Facebook, available soon as a podcast in the iTunes store, icba.ca, at ICBABC on Twitter, facebook.com/the ICBA. We are in our new studio. We're working out the bugs. I promise shortly we will be a lean, mean ICBA podcasting machine. I'm Jordan Bateman. I'm the Director of Communications for the Independent Contractors and Businesses Association. Joined
Chris Gardner, President of ICBA. It's outstanding to be here in our new studio.
Very exciting
studio,
day. Yes. See, our new studio is a big technological advancement, which means we look better, we sound better, but also means that we are a little bit more to do technologically, so we're still learning all that. Thank you for your patience.
Are you sure we look better?
Well, how could we not? For 42 years, ICBA has been the voice of BC's construction and responsible resource development industries and a relentless and passionate advocate for free enterprise. Today, 250,000 people got up, went to work in construction in British Columbia. That's 9% of BC's economy. And on this podcast, we talk about BC politics and economic issues from a free enterprise, free market perspective. We're going to talk taxes, lots of NDP taxes here in BC. But first, Chris, you and I attended the BC Business Council meeting this week with Bill Morneau, the finance minister. Yep. Came and spoke to a crowd. I thought actually kind of a sparse crowd of maybe 100 folks. Not a huge room that you'd expect in previous years from the finance minister. What did Bill Morneau have to say about his federal budget?
Well, a couple of things. First, it's always good to see a federal finance minister come out to British Columbia. Mm-hmm. We're sort of in the far-flung regions of the country, and we don't get a lot of federal attention. Good to see him out. Yeah. However, the message was I would say, mixed on a couple of fronts. First of all, not a lot of, in his opening comments, his opening remarks, not a lot of discussion around getting our responsible resource development projects approved and getting those shovels in the ground, specifically for Kinder Morgan. And also on LNG Canada, wood fiber LNG. There's a lot of issues still to be sorted out at the federal level, and it would have been nice to hear him say 2 things. 1, Kinder Morgan's moving ahead, got the full support of the federal government, and we're going to do everything we can to get shovels in the ground. 2, it would have been good to hear him say that he was committed to ensuring that this year the federal government would do everything it could to ensure that LNG Canada and wood fiber LNG started construction and got to their final investment decision.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty telling at how out of touch he was with what was going on in the room when he got up and gave a speech basically on gender equity. Obviously an important issue, something that certainly at ICBA we support. That's why we want to see more women in trades, because it's such great jobs and family supporting jobs going forward. That's what he wanted to talk about. And certainly if you read their budget, it's 150 pages of sociology and review in that. But the questions. So BC Business Council had this great little app. You could ask questions. People could upvote questions that would then get asked to the stage. Virtually every single question was on competitiveness and tax issues.
And I think if you talk to members of the business community in British Columbia right now, small business owners, medium-sized businesses, leaders of larger corporations, there's a lot of nervousness and anxiety in British Columbia right now for lots of different reasons. First and foremost, we have a government in Ottawa and a government in Victoria that recently they both come out with new budgets, and they're in sync in terms of the social program agenda that they both set out. And they're also in sync in terms of increasing taxes and making it more difficult for businesses to succeed and to grow and to create more opportunities for British Columbians. And that's a real concern. And you add on the tax burden with the regulatory burden, with the uncertainty around some of the big projects that we're hoping to see go forward in British Columbia. And that is creating a lot of anxiety among business leaders in this province.
Yeah, absolutely. One comment I'm going to seize on that I was especially bothered by. He was asked about the deficit. Liberals always promised to run a deficit, but said that they would be balanced within 5 years or so. That was their platform. They ran a deficit that was 2.5 times what they promised. They have no plan to balance the budget. I think the PBO, the Parliamentary Budget Office, their last stats said maybe in 2045 at this rate we could probably balance the budget. This is a big problem. And Bill Morneau kind of talked about debt to GDP numbers and then said, quote, "I'm not too fussy on the numbers when it comes to debt."
Well, I think...
Let's get fussy on the numbers. When you're the finance minister of a country like Canada, get fussy on the numbers, buddy.
Yeah. Well, and I think there's an attitude in some governments, you take the economy for granted, and your focus is on creating new programs. And there's no endless amount of programs that a government with not concerned about the numbers, not focusing on the economy, they can find lots of ways to spend taxpayer dollars.
Yeah.
And both the federal and the provincial governments are doing a good job at spending our dollars, and they're focused on sharing wealth and prosperity. But they're forgetting that before you can share prosperity, before you can share wealth, you've got to create it. And it all starts with people making investments in businesses, starting a small business and investing in companies, expanding and pursuing growth, creating opportunities, hiring more people. And if you can't do that right, you aren't going to have the dollars to spend on the social programs.
No, absolutely. And with that, let's switch gears to another government that loves to spend money and tax their way to prosperity, apparently. We have the John Horgan government. And I think for the first few minutes, the first few days after the provincial budget came out, people like Keith Baldry and Vaughn Palmer were highly complimentary of the budget. Even some business groups, the Greater Vancouver Board of Trade gave it a C+ for that budget. You and I were perplexed a bit by this because we saw a number of tax measures in it. And I think over the past week or two, we've started to see different groups and businesses and people analyze what the tax impact is going to be. So I'm going to walk through kind of the 4 big taxes in the provincial budget. Let's talk about each one. First of all is one that I know we've started to have internal discussions about here at ICBA. We have we're a 3-part platform. We have insurance, we have training, we have public policy advocacy. We are a significant business association with a significant payroll. Yep. Now we are on the hook for a nearly 2% payroll tax to replace the MSP. Some numbers on this. Over 3 years, the elimination of the MSP. So remember, they already cut in half. Now they're trying to eliminate that second half. The elimination of the MSP was going to cost the government $1.7 billion. I'd argue it doesn't cost the government anything. It actually, there is no government coffers. It's taxpayer money. But okay, $1.7 billion the government was looking to make up. This new payroll tax will bring in $4.3 billion over that same 3 years. It is a double dip for more than a full year. And the BC Liberals, who've been slow to get out of the blocks in opposition, have been all over this issue and pounding it in the House. Let me give you some stats here. There's a Native Friendship Center in Prince George. They're looking at a $190,000 tax bill. Yep. A veggie farm in Ladner, $100,000. A Langley Greenhouse Company, $100,000. A Kootenay Ski Resort, $160,000. Not just businesses. School district, the Victoria School District, is expecting $1.5 million more in taxes that they're going to have to pay for their staff. $70 million, the BC Teachers Federation estimates, over 60 school boards. City halls are facing it, $600,000 in Coquitlam, $700,000 in Kamloops, $3.5 million in Surrey. Langley Township, where I live, about $1.5 million, according to the folks there. Vancouver, $13 million they have to come up with. This payroll tax, yep. Not only are we going to have to pay the payroll tax as an association or as a company or as an employer, we're going to see all of those bills from city halls filter down to the rest of us in property tax increases, 2%, for example, just to cover it for Langley.
Well, it's shocking. There's a lot of discussion in the business community where people are saying, did they really intend to go this far with this tax? And the conclusion we're drawing is, yes, they did intend. They have, in government, they have access to everyone in the finance department, financial analysts. They understood the implications of this payroll tax when they rolled it out. And the narrative from the NDP side of the House is very simple. Businesses make money. We're going to take money from businesses and we're going to redistribute it to programs that we think are important for the province. And the challenge is they've forgotten a couple of very important points. First, everything starts with a job, and you don't tax your way into economic growth. You don't tax companies into growing and prospering and succeeding and hiring more people and creating more opportunities. But the challenge with the NDP is they have very few people who are members of the NDP who've actually worked in the private sector. Very few people who are entrepreneurs, very few people who started their own business, very few people who've succeeded in the private sector. They've got a lot of community activists and political organizers and people who have focused their entire careers on taking government money and spending it. And what they're forgetting is that it's not government money, it's taxpayer money. And most small and medium-sized businesses are going to be hit very hard by this tax. There was very little consultation. It's ill-conceived. And
I would say there was no consultation. The consultation, we went to the MSP removal committee and we presented a submission and they worked on a draft report and then we're going to make a number of changes. This superseded, and those guys have been left twisting in the wind saying, why were we doing all this work when you had your plan already in mind?
They didn't issue their final report before the tax was unveiled.
They had no idea it was even coming.
Yeah. So it's we're not even a year into the NDP government, and they've already set the tone. The tone of this government is very clear. They're going to increase taxes, and when they increase taxes, they're increasing taxes on small business, medium-sized business, and larger businesses, and they're going to take that money and they're going to spend it. And they said in the budget's balanced because they're going to raise $5.5 billion over 3 years, and they're going to spend it all. So that means it's balanced, and for some mysterious reason, we shall be happy about that. And it's going to make life more affordable. Well, it's not making life more affordable for the businesses who have to pay this tax. Nope. It's not making life more affordable for people who won't have opportunities now to get jobs because businesses are now going to have to find ways to recoup those costs. It's not going to be balanced from the perspective of that they're just increasing. The billions and billions in taxes that they're raising are disproportionate. So there's nothing in this budget that's balanced, and there's nothing about affordability.
Yeah, and if you're in the Victoria School District, you're looking at having to cut 20 teachers just to pay your health care tax, your payroll tax.
It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense. It's a problematic tax. It's corrosive to employment. The only people who want it are the CCPA and the crazy lefties who think that taxes are too low in this province. Tell me how in a province where affordability is the number one issue, tell me how taxes are too low again, because that doesn't make a lot of sense. Yeah. So that's the payroll tax. We're fighting that tooth and nail. We're going to keep fighting it. Watch for more stuff next week on this. I think the NDP are in big trouble on this, and as someone who fought to eliminate the medical services premium tax for a long time, like I did, to see it actually turn into a worse tax, I would have said, how could that be possible? Well, congratulations, Carol James, the NDP, when you rushed into tax policy. You don't think it out. You don't have that person to kind of give you the sober second look. This is the craziness that happens. Tax number 2, this is getting a lot of press. Vaughn Palmer's been all over this week, the so-called speculation tax, which has actually morphed into a second home tax. Right. In scrums, this is taxation by press conference, as Andrew Weaver has dubbed it. In scrums, John Horgan and Carol James claimed that no British Columbian would pay this tax. Turns out that many British Columbians are going to end up paying this tax. Essentially, it's taxing empty homes, in a number of jurisdictions, number of parts of the province. The problem with that, of course, is that there are many people who have second properties, recreational properties, not necessarily wealthy people, many people who have inherited it from years ago. This seems to me to be another tax that has real legs as far as the opposition goes.
In short, it's not fair.
Yeah.
It's not fair to, out of nowhere, drop down a budget and say we're going to tax a recreational property. I think everybody knows people who have friends, neighbors who have a cabin somewhere by a lake. There's not everyone does, but a lot of people do. And for them to wake up the next day and say, okay, now we've got the family cabin, and we're going to have to pay $10,000 or $15,000 or more in tax. Well, that is just simply not fair. It doesn't make any sense. And the heart of this, the root of this is
they hate wealthy people.
They hate wealthy people. But their whole narrative is let's make the housing more affordable in a lot of cities in British Columbia, but across the province, but particularly Metro Vancouver and some of the larger centres. And their focus has been not on supply. And anyone who remembers Economics 101 will know that you've got supply and demand, and if you've got a scarcity of goods, the price for those goods increases. Yep. And right now, we don't have enough housing stock coming on the market. They haven't focused on that at all. They're focusing on taxing existing homeowners and or putting up barriers for those from out of province to purchase homes in British Columbia. And that is not driving the price of housing to where it is. It's not the foreign buyer. And there's been a lot of, and the foreign buyers, some of them are buying at the very high end. That's not pushing up the price of houses at the lower end. It's about supply. and supply. There's a logjam in most local governments. It'll take longer to get a building permit and all your approvals in place before you can put a shovel in the ground than to build the townhome complex or the condo.
No, absolutely. It's crazy. The math doesn't work. This is, they've talked about tax credits for certain British Columbians based on income and whatnot. So what they're trying to do is, prove that you pay income tax in BC, and then you'll get that money back on your second property. The problem with that is, this tax could run, a $1 million property, which, if you're talking about a waterfront or cab, that's, very little. The tax would run about $20,000. If you have a $100,000 a year income in BC, which, is very good income, you're paying about $7,000, $8,000 in provincial income tax. So, you're down 12 grand.
Yeah.
And for people who have inherited a property, for example, let's say grandma and grandpa bought on Salt Spring Island back in the day, it's been your family cottage for years and years and years, generations of your family have gone through there, you share it. All of a sudden now you're talking about bills of, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 a year. You don't make that much. These people don't make $400,000 a year to pay for.
And the response to that cannot be for a government to say, it doesn't matter, you can afford it.
Yeah, because they can't.
It's not fair.
Yeah.
And this is not how you build consensus around a tax regime that should be fair and around a tax system that should be encouraging jobs and investment in our province to grow our economy. And this is heavy-handed, and it's not right.
Okay, tax number 3, they've raised the property transfer tax. Now, this is an idea that the NDP stole from the Green Party. Little known fact, the Green Party was pushing for, huge property transfer tax increases in the last election. No one bothered to read their platform. I did as an old tax fighter and was stunned by it. They've stolen this idea and said that on any property worth $3 million or more, you're going to pay a higher rate of property transfer tax. The idea here, of course, is, what the NDP would consider evil people like Chip Wilson from Lululemon, who has a home worth $75 million, or was it Peter Brown from Canaccord who sold his for $35 million? These guys should be, paying their fair share. They shouldn't be all that. There's been a problem. There's a hiccup here. There are some unintended consequences of this tax, and that's around land assembly. So I live in Langley. I live in Willoughby, growing community. We're in the process of growing from 20,000 people to 90,000 people in Willoughby over a 20-year period. We're at about 35,000, 40,000 now. Developers are assembling land in order to build townhouses, condos, high density, all of that. Towers, in fact, in Willoughby planned for that as well. The problem is you can't buy a property in Langley for less than $2 million an acre. In Willoughby now it's running closer to $3 million an acre. You start to build a little parcel so that you can build a townhouse complex. Let's say it's 10 acres. All of a sudden you're talking about a $30, $35 million property buy. The developer's now paying the property transfer tax on that, plus a luxury property transfer tax. And that land assembly will turn over a couple of times before it finally ends up in the end user, the townhouse owner's possession. Guess who's going to end up paying all of those extra taxes?
I'm going to guess it's the person who's buying the condo or the townhome.
Yes, it is not Chip Wilson who will be paying for it. It will be the end buyer, the family moving here to Langley, the millennials trying to get into the market. They end up paying this. And we talk about housing affordability. I'd like to hear from the housing minister of the province of British Columbia. How does this kind of luxury property transfer tax, which sounds so good, right? Luxury. How does that actually affect the cost of housing? I'm betting they have no idea. I'm betting they didn't do any modeling on it.
Well, it's to your point, it's not a luxury tax.
No.
It's a tax. It's going to be a tax that will increase the cost of every condo and every townhome complex that's built in British Columbia.
Yep.
It's not fair. It doesn't make any sense. You cannot tax housing to affordability.
No.
So again,
we'd be there already.
That's right. The budget is flawed. There's nothing about balance in this budget because they raised $5.5 billion in taxes over the next 3 years, and there's nothing about affordability because there's nothing in this tax regime and all the new taxes that they are increasing that are going to help make the lives of middle class and working class British Columbians better. Yeah,
and you're saying, oh well, Jordan, you're just talking about rich people again. If I assemble land worth $20 million to build a townhouse complex on, which is would be 7 or 8 acres in Langley, $20 million. The tax is going from $19,000 property transfer tax. This is on top of this. So but on top of the property transfer tax, there's school taxes. The NDP have also raised that rate. It's going from $19,000 to $85,000, which means another $66,000 every year that land is held.
Yep.
Guy, like we cannot. You're right. Tax ourselves. We should not be taxing housing like it's cigarettes.
That's right.
Like we need to get some reality checks going. There's a municipal campaign. I want to hear from affordable housing advocates. Hector Bremner, you watch the show. I want to hear from you. How are you going to lower the tax and red tape on these on builders if you really want to see more supply? So we have that. We'll do more on that next week. We have Anne McMullen coming in from the Urban Development Institute. Yep. She is living this nightmare in real time as developers get their mind around what this means for them. She's going to come in. She might be our first guest.
Could be our first guest.
I guess we better get better at the technical side.
We better know our numbers on real estate development.
That's right. All right. And then finally, on top of all that, we now live in an era where we have $1.52 a liter gas. And the government has said they're going to raise the carbon tax. April 1st, that will go up by another 2 cents a liter. That will
Not another tax.
That will bring
I
another
just can't believe it.
tax burden of about 55 cents per liter. Gas Buddy, the website that tracks gas prices, says if a family like mine in Langley just crossed the border to fill up all year, we would save $2,000 Canadian a year just on one vehicle. We have a minivan and a Prius. We could probably save like $3,000 if we just took the time to go down to the United States. I can tell you, living in Langley, many of us take the time to go to Abbotsford in the U.S.
So the irony about
more carbon taxes.
So the irony about the NDP budget is they've layered on all these taxes, and they're saying we're making life more affordable for British Columbians. In fact, they're making life more expensive for British Columbians, and they're making it more difficult to do business in British Columbia. They're making it harder for smaller businesses to grow and succeed and hire new people and create opportunities. There is nothing in this budget that's balanced or affordable, and if it's not fair, and we are going to we're going to pay the cost of all of this as taxpayers as we go forward, and our economy is going to be hurt.
Yeah, no, absolutely. There's no carbon tax in the United States.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Hits and misses. We've been depressed enough. Hits and misses. I have a miss. So Camp Cloud, it's a protest camp on Burnaby Mountain. They're fighting the Kinder Morgan pipeline expansion. We call it Camp Clown around here because it seems like to be the more fitting thing. They posted a video of a woman chaining herself to a tree yesterday. Chris, first of all, it was an active tree falling area. You can actually see like guys working behind, not realizing she's there, falling trees. She put a chain around her neck. Interesting way to chain yourself to a tree. Most of the time you would want to chain yourself around your belly. She chained herself around her neck to the tree and started complaining on Facebook Live about Kinder Morgan, quote, bringing carcinogenic chemicals into the environment. Of course, the irony was lost on her as she complained about carcinogenic chemicals. She was puffing away on a cigarette. Not great. She got arrested. The chain was removed. Kinder Morgan is in BC Supreme Court today trying to get an injunction against 15 of these camp clowners because they're starting to get more and more dangerous and reckless in what they're doing, jumping on top of trucks, jumping in front of moving vehicles, going into active tree falling zones for their own safety. I hope that injunction is granted. But that is my miss. Camp Clown, carcinogenics, have another cigarette lady.
Okay, my miss. Premier Horgan yesterday announces that construction on the Patella Bridge is going to be done by union-only companies. So what does that mean? That means he's really talking about 13% of the construction workers in this province who will have the opportunity to work on that project. So first of all, this is fundamentally unfair. 87% of the construction workforce in British Columbia are with either unions that are not affiliated with the NDP or with non-union companies. And all of those workers, 87% of British Columbia's men and women who are in construction and part of those firms, every day get up and build projects that make our province better. They deserve the opportunity to be able to work on this project and bid. And so that's the first thing. The second thing is it's going to increase costs of construction because now the government's basically saying we're just going to go to 13% of the companies that have unionized labor to do this work. So costs are going to go up.
Yeah.
And
let's put this in context. Imagine if government stipulated, Chris, you can now only go to 13% of restaurants for business meals. Yeah. Guess what happens to those restaurants? Great for them.
That's right.
They see big profits because they can raise their cost astronomically. bad for us because we can't take as many clients out for lunch to business.
And they're doing it with taxpayer dollars. They're taking taxes from all British Columbians and then saying, we're only going to spend it for this $1.3 billion bridge
people
project.
Who gave us money in the last election.
And our supporters.
Yeah.
It's unfair. It's not right. Doesn't make sense.
It's favoritism, pure and simple.
Yeah. And it's another policy that will increase costs and it will impact affordability. It's not balanced. There's nothing balanced about this government.
It's a sign. You can take the NDP out of the 90s, but you can't take the 1990s out of the NDP. This is exactly what got them into trouble the last time, and these fools are going to go down that path again. Yeah, we're passionate about that one at ICBA. Watch for more on that, too. We're not going to go quietly on that one because, we're a construction association. We want to keep people building. All we want is the opportunity to bid.
We're not saying that. We're saying that everybody, whether you're union or non-union or something in between, everyone should have the opportunity to bid. Yeah. And the government should choose the contractor that will provide the best value, will do the work safely, and
provide the best product.
And at the best value. That's what government is elected to do.
God, we are such radicals here at ICBA. Imagine wanting value for money from government.
I don't know. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. So John Horgan, get ready for that. We're not going to go quietly on that. It may actually be illegal.
We'll see.
All right.
We got lots perking over here.
Lots of irons in the fire here at the mighty ICBA. Thank you for listening to the ICBA cast, our first from the new studio. The TV will come along shortly, hopefully by the time Ann visits us. We will be back soon. Starting next week, we're going to try to do more Facebook Lives, broadcasts of just a few minutes long to bring you up to date on breaking news, so watch for those. But you can bet that we'll always have our longer sit-down kind of near the end of the week with Chris and I talking about all the important issues. ICBA.ca, at ICBABC on Twitter, Facebook.com/theICBA. And we're going to go out with our song of the week, The Beatles.
Of course, Taxman.
This one goes out to Carol James and John Horgan. You guys have become taxmen pretty darn quickly. Have a great weekend, everyone. Hang on.